Darkness had settled over Memorial Children's Hospital, where in room 217, 6-year-old Emma Collins lay motionless, her small figure barely visible beneath the white sheets. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor grew fainter with each passing moment, as if counting down the precious seconds that remained. By her bedside, Max, her devoted German shepherd, maintained an unwavering vigil, his deep brown eyes fixed on his young owner with an intensity that seemed almost supernatural. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the sterile room, where Jennifer and David Collins sat in rigid plastic chairs, their faces etched with the kind of grief only parents facing the unthinkable could understand. Jennifer's trembling hands clutched her daughter's tiny fingers, while David stared blankly at the medical charts hanging at the foot of the bed, as if searching for answers in the maze of numbers and medical terminology that had become their new reality. Max's presence was a stark contrast to the clinical atmosphere. His warm fur brushed against the cold metal of the hospital bed as he pressed himself as close to Emma as the medical equipment would allow. The dog hadn't eaten or slept properly since Emma had been admitted 3 weeks ago, refusing to leave, even when the hospital staff had initially protested his presence. It had taken special permission from the hospital board to allow him to stay, but something in the way he watched over Emma had convinced even the most skeptical of doctors. The sound of squeaking wheels interrupted the room's heavy silence as Dr. Sarah Martinez entered, pushing a cart laden with medical equipment. Her face, usually bright and optimistic, carried the weight of what she was about to share. The latest test results had confirmed their worst fears. Emma's rare autoimmune condition was advancing rapidly, attacking her vital organs with a ferocity that modern medicine seemed powerless to combat. "Mr. and Mrs. Collins," Dr. Martinez began, her voice soft but steady, "I wish I had better news. Emma's latest blood work shows that her immune system is—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "It's essentially turning against itself at an accelerated rate. We've tried every available treatment, every experimental protocol we could access, but nothing seems to be slowing the progression." Jennifer's sob broke the silence that followed, while David wrapped his arm around her shoulders, his own tears falling silently. Max lifted his head at the sound, his ears perking forward as if he understood the gravity of the doctor's words. He let out a low whine, nuzzling closer to Emma's hand. How long?" David managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Martinez's professional composure wavered for a moment. "At this rate, without a dramatic change, perhaps 48 hours. I'm so sorry. We'll make her as comfortable as possible, and you can stay with her the entire time." As the doctor spoke, Max suddenly stood up on his paws, his entire body becoming alert. His tail, which had been limp for days, began to move slightly, and his nose twitched, as if catching an invisible scent. The change in his demeanor was so dramatic that even Dr. Martinez paused mid-sentence to observe him. The German shepherd moved to the head of Emma's bed, positioning himself so that his body was aligned with hers from shoulder to hip. His breathing, usually quiet and steady, became deep and rhythmic, almost ceremonial in its precision. There was something in his stance that seemed deliberate, purposeful, as if he was preparing for something only he could sense. Jennifer noticed the change in Max's behavior and felt a flutter of something, not quite hope, but perhaps its distant cousin. She'd heard stories, read articles about animals sensing things humans couldn't, about bonds between pets and their owners that defied logical explanation. But this felt different, more intense than anything she'd ever witnessed between Max and Emma before. "Dr. Martinez," she said, her voice shaking, "look at Max. He's never acted like this before." The doctor approached cautiously, her scientific mind already forming rational explanations for the dog's behavior. But as she reached for her stethoscope, something in Max's unwavering gaze made her hesitate. The dog's eyes, usually a warm brown, seemed to hold a deeper intelligence, an ancient wisdom that transcended his animal nature. Outside the hospital window, the city lights flickered like distant stars, unaware of the drama unfolding in room 217. The night shift nurses moved quietly through their rounds, the hospital's routine continuing its eternal cycle. But inside Emma's room, time seemed to stand still, suspended in a moment where hope and despair danced on a knife's edge, and a dog's inexplicable behavior hinted at possibilities beyond human understanding. David, who had remained silent, suddenly remembered something his grandmother used to say about animals being bridges between worlds, about their ability to reach across boundaries that humans couldn't even perceive. At the time, he'd dismissed it as the fanciful thinking of an old woman. Now, watching Max's transformed demeanor, those words echoed in his mind with new significance. The monitors continued their electronic vigil, their steady beeping a countdown to what seemed inevitable. But in the space between those mechanical heartbeats, something was shifting, changing, as if the very air in room 217 was being charged with an energy that no medical instrument could measure. And at the center of it all was Max, standing guard over Emma like a sentinel at the gates between life and death, his presence a declaration that perhaps the story wasn't over just yet. As midnight approached, Emma's condition continued to deteriorate. The medical equipment's steady rhythm had become an ominous countdown, each beep seeming weaker than the last. Dr. Martinez had ordered additional medication to ease Emma's discomfort, but the girl's vital signs continued their gradual decline, painting a picture of inevitable loss that no parent should ever have to witness. Jennifer sat hunched over in her chair, her fingers intertwined with Emma's small hand, whispering prayers into the sterile air. David paced the length of the room, his footsteps echoing against the linoleum floors, occasionally stopping to stroke Emma's forehead or adjust her blanket. The weight of helplessness pressed down on them both, crushing their spirits with each passing hour. Max hadn't moved from his position, his body still aligned with Emma's, but something about him had changed. His fur seemed to shimmer under the harsh hospital lights, and his breathing had fallen into an unusual pattern, deep, measured breaths that seemed almost synchronized with Emma's own labored breathing. The nurses who came to check Emma's vitals couldn't help but notice the strange phenomenon, though none could explain it. Nurse Wilson, a veteran of the pediatric ward with 20 years of experience, entered the room to perform her routine checks. She had seen countless cases, witnessed both miracles and heartbreaks, but something about Max's behavior made her pause. "In all my years," she whispered to Jennifer, "I've never seen anything quite like this. It's as if he's—" She trailed off, unable to find the right words to describe what she was witnessing. The dog's eyes had taken on an otherworldly gleam, reflecting light in a way that seemed impossible under the fluorescent bulbs. His muscles were tense, not with anxiety but with purpose, as if he was engaging in some invisible battle that only he could fight. Occasionally, a tremor would run through his body, but his position remained unchanged, steadfast in his vigil. Over Emma, around 2 a.m, Dr. Martinez returned to check on Emma's condition. The latest blood work had shown even further deterioration of her immune system, and the doctor's face betrayed the gravity of the situation. "Her white blood cell count is critically low," she explained quietly to David and Jennifer. "Her body is essentially shutting down, and we're running out of options." As if in response to these words, Max let out a low, resonant sound. Not quite a whine, not quite a growl, but something in between that seemed to vibrate through the room. The monitors tracking Emma's vitals flickered for a brief moment, causing Dr. Martinez to frown and check the equipment. Jennifer noticed something strange about Max's appearance. "David," she called softly, "look at his fur." Where Max's coat had always been a rich black and tan, characteristic of German shepherds, Subtle streaks of grey had begun to appear, spreading slowly from his muzzle down his neck. It was as if he was aging before their eyes, though that seemed impossible. David approached Max carefully, reaching out to touch the greying fur. The dog acknowledged him with a brief glance, but maintained his focus on Emma. The fur under David's fingers felt different, not just in colour, but in texture, as if something fundamental was changing in the dog's very being. Outside the window, the city had fallen into its nighttime quiet, but room 217 was filled with a tension that seemed to crackle in the air. The medical equipment continued its vigil, but now the readings seemed to fluctuate in subtle, inexplicable ways. Dr. Martinez found herself checking and rechecking the machines, unable to explain the small inconsistencies she was observing. "There's something else," Jennifer said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The room, it feels different." She wasn't wrong. The air had taken on a strange quality, heavy with an energy that seemed to center around Max and Emma. Even the shadows in the corners of the room appeared deeper, more significant somehow. A young resident who had stopped by to review Emma's charts stepped back involuntarily upon entering the room, overwhelmed by the inexplicable atmosphere. "I've never felt anything like this," she admitted to Dr. Martinez. "It's like walking into what?" Dr. Martinez asked when the resident hesitated. "Into something sacred," the resident finished, her scientific training warring with what her instincts were telling her. As the night deepened, the strange energy in room 217 continued to build. Max's breathing had become even more pronounced, each exhale seeming to carry a weight of its own. The greying of his fur had spread further, now reaching down his shoulders and back, but his strength and focus appeared undiminished. If anything, his presence seemed to grow stronger, more determined, as if he was gathering his resources for something momentous. Jennifer and David could only watch, caught between hope and fear, as their daughter's faithful companion continued his mysterious vigil. They had no way of knowing that what they were witnessing was just the beginning, that in the hours to come, their understanding of love, loyalty, and the boundaries between life and death would be forever changed by a dog's unfathomable devotion. In the early hours before dawn, room 217 became the epicenter of something extraordinary. The first sign came when Emma's heart monitor began to show subtle changes, nothing dramatic enough to trigger alarms, but noticeable to the trained eyes of the medical staff. The intervals between beats shifted ever so slightly, taking on a new rhythm that seemed to synchronize with Max's deep, measured breathing. Dr. Martinez had just finished her rounds when Nurse Wilson urgently called her back to Emma's room. "Doctor, you need to see this," she said, pointing to the latest readings. The numbers didn't make sense. Emma's white blood cell count, which had been critically low just hours before, was showing minimal but consistent improvement. It wasn't enough to indicate recovery, but it defied every medical expectation for a patient in her condition. Max's transformation had become more pronounced. The greying of his fur had spread across his entire body, giving him an almost ethereal appearance under the hospital lights. His muscles trembled with constant fine movements, as if he was engaging in some tremendous effort that remained invisible to human eyes. Most striking were his eyes. They had taken on a luminous quality that seemed to pierce through the physical realm itself. Jennifer, who hadn't left her daughter's side, noticed something else. "Her hand," she whispered, afraid to speak too loudly lest she break whatever spell was being woven. "It feels warmer." David immediately placed his own hand on Emma's forehead. The deathly chill that had pervaded her skin for the past day had indeed begun to fade. The atmosphere in the room had become charged with an almost electrical energy. The air felt thick, as if reality itself was being compressed and reshaped by some unseen force. Medical equipment began to behave erratically, not malfunctioning, but displaying readings that should have been impossible. Screens flickered with patterns of light that didn't correspond to any known diagnostic display. Dr. Martinez, trained in the rigors of medical science, found herself facing something that challenged every aspect of her professional knowledge. "This is unprecedented," she admitted, reviewing Emma's latest results. "It's as if her immune system is being rebuilt, but that's not possible. The damage was too extensive." Around 4 in the morning, Emma's breathing changed. The labored, shallow gasps that had marked her decline were gradually replaced by deeper, more regular breaths. Each inhale seemed to draw not just air, but something more substantial, something that shimmered just at the edge of visual perception. Max's behavior shifted as well. His stillness gave way to subtle movements, his body swaying slightly, as if moved by an invisible current. The dog's presence seemed to fill more than just physical space. It was as if he had become a conduit for something vast and ancient, something that operated beyond the boundaries of modern medical understanding. A young nurse, making her first check of the morning shift, dropped her clipboard upon entering the room. The sound startled everyone except Max, who remained focused, entirely on Emma. "The air," the nurse gasped. "It's glowing." And indeed, in the dim light of dawn, there seemed to be a faint luminescence surrounding the bed, centered on the point where Max's body met Emma's. David, who had been skeptical of anything that couldn't be explained by logic and reason, found himself remembering more of his grandmother's stories. She had spoken of guardian spirits that took animal form, of bonds between souls that transcended the physical realm. At the time, he had dismissed them as fairy tales. Now, watching the impossible unfold before his eyes, those stories took on new meaning. "Look at his paws," Jennifer whispered, pointing to where Max's feet touched the hospital bed. The previously black paw pads had taken on a silvery sheen, and tiny sparks of what looked like static electricity crackled around them. But unlike normal static, these sparks seemed to flow purposefully, creating patterns that danced across the sheets before disappearing into Emma's still form. Dr. Martinez had called in a specialist from neurology, Dr. Chen, hoping to find a scientific explanation for what they were witnessing. Dr. Chen arrived with an EEG machine, intending to measure brain activity. The readings they obtained defied explanation. Emma's brain waves and Max's had synchronized into a pattern that neither doctor had ever seen before. "This is beyond anything in medical literature," Dr. Chen muttered, staring at the readouts. "It's as if they're operating on the same frequency, but that's not supposed to be possible between different species." The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon when Emma's fingers twitched, the first voluntary movement she had made in days. Max's ears immediately perked up, and a visible shudder ran through his now grey body. The monitors recorded a surge in activity across all vital signs, but instead of setting off warning alarms, the readings settled into stronger, more stable patterns. Jennifer and David held their breath, watching their daughter's face for any further signs of change. The morning light streaming through the window seemed to carry an unusual quality, creating halos around Max's transformed figure and casting golden reflections off the medical equipment that shouldn't have been possible. Given the angle of the sun, in that moment, suspended between night and day, between science and miracle, between despair and hope, something fundamental was shifting in room 217. Max's unwavering vigil was approaching its crescendo, and the impossible was becoming reality before their very eyes. The boundary between the natural and supernatural had grown thin, and through that gossamer veil, a dog's love was reaching across dimensions to reclaim a young life from the brink of extinction. The morning light had barely touched the hospital walls when chaos erupted in room 217. Emma's vital signs suddenly spiked, sending machines into a frenzy of beeping and flashing alerts. Medical staff rushed in, prepared for the worst, but what they witnessed stopped them in their tracks. Emma's skin had begun to regain its color, changing from a deathly pallor to a warm, living hue that spread slowly from her face down to her fingertips. Max's transformation had reached its peak. His once black fur had turned completely silver-white, gleaming with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Emma's strengthening heartbeat. The dog's body trembled continuously now, but his stance remained unwavering, as if anchored to some unseen force that flowed between him and Emma. "This is impossible," Dr. Martinez breathed, staring at the latest test results that were printing out in rapid succession. "Her white blood cell count is normalizing. The autoimmune response it's reversing itself." She turned to Dr. Chen, who was still monitoring the synchronized brain patterns. "Have you ever seen anything like this?" Dr. Chen shook his head, his scientific certainty shaken to its core. "The closest thing I've seen to this was in theoretical papers about quantum entanglement in biological systems, but this is something else entirely. It's as if their life forces are somehow interconnected." Jennifer and David watched in awe as color flooded back into their daughter's cheeks. Emma's breathing had strengthened to the point where she no longer needed supplemental oxygen, and her vital signs continued to improve with each passing moment. The medical staff worked around Max, none of them daring to disturb whatever mysterious process was unfolding. Her immune system, one of the specialists, noted reviewing the latest blood work, "It's not just recovering, it's rewriting itself. The markers for autoimmune disease are disappearing, being replaced by something else, something we've never seen before." The air in the room had become thick with an almost tangible energy. Small objects, pens, paper clips, even the lighter, medical instruments, began to respond to some invisible force, shifting slightly on their surfaces as if in the presence of a magnetic field. The lights flickered, not with electrical interference, but with a pattern that seemed to dance in harmony with the energy flowing between Max and Emma. Nurse Wilson, who had seen countless medical miracles in her career, found herself wiping tears from her eyes. "In all my years," she whispered to Jennifer, "I've never seen anything like this. It's as if he's literally giving her his life force." The truth of those words became increasingly apparent as they watched Max's transformation continue. His powerful frame, once the picture of canine strength, had begun to show signs of aging that went beyond the change in his coat color. His muscles, while still locked in their protective stance, trembled with increasing fatigue. Yet his eyes, fixed unwaveringly on Emma, burned with an intensity that seemed to grow stronger even as his body showed signs of weakening. Around mid-morning, Emma's fingers began to move more deliberately and her eyelids fluttered with increasing frequency. Each small movement was accompanied by a visible surge in the ethereal energy that filled the room and a corresponding tremor through Max's transformed body. David, who had been documenting everything on his phone, suddenly noticed something extraordinary in the photos he'd taken. "Look at this," he called to Dr. Martinez, showing her the screen. In the digital images, a distinct aura was visible around Max and Emma, a phenomenon that shouldn't have been possible to capture with a standard phone camera. The medical team had given up trying to explain what they were witnessing in scientific terms. Instead, they focused on monitoring and documenting every aspect of this unprecedented event. Blood samples were drawn and analyzed in real time, showing changes that defied medical knowledge. Brain activity continued to be recorded, revealing patterns that would later revolutionize our understanding of consciousness and connection. Emma, despite her weakness, seemed to sense Max's struggle. "Mom," she said, her voice quavering, "Max is tired. He's been fighting for me, hasn't he?" The perception in her words struck Jennifer speechless. How could her 6-year-old daughter understand something that even the medical professionals couldn't fully comprehend? David moved to support Max as the dog's legs began to buckle, but something held him back, an invisible force field of energy that still surrounded both Max and Emma. The air between them seemed to shimmer with residual power, like heat waves, rising from summer pavement, but carrying a quality that was decidedly otherworldly. Dr. Chen, still monitoring the brain activity of both Emma and Max, noticed something remarkable. "The synchronization is starting to separate," he announced, studying the readouts. "But there's something else, something I've never seen before. It's as if there's been a permanent change in both of their neural patterns." The room had taken on an almost sacred quality, as if it had become a temple where the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds had temporarily dissolved. The medical staff moved quietly, reverently, aware that they were witnesses to something that transcended their scientific understanding. As the afternoon light filled the room, Emma's strength continued to return, but each improvement seemed to come at a cost to Max. His silver-white fur had begun to lose its ethereal glow, taking on a more earthly quality, though the changes he had undergone appeared permanent. His once black coat would never return to its original color. He had been marked forever by what he had done. The veterinarian, after attempting to examine Max, could only shake her head in wonder. "His vital signs are weak," she reported, "but there's something else, something I can't quite explain. It's as if his entire biological makeup has been altered at a fundamental level." Emma, now able to sit up slightly with her mother's help, kept her eyes fixed on Max. "He's not going to be the same anymore, is he?" she asked, her voice carrying a maturity far beyond her years. The question hung in the air, heavy with implications that no one in the room could fully answer. The bond between them had been transformed into something that defied explanation, a connection that had literally reshaped both of their biological destinies. As the medical team continued to monitor both of them, it became clear that what they were witnessing was not just a miracle of healing, but a testament to the depths of devotion that could exist between a child and her faithful companion. As evening approached, Room 217 had become a focal point of intense medical and scientific interest. Doctors and specialists from various departments had gathered to witness the unprecedented event, though they maintained a respectful distance, aware that they were in the presence of something that defied conventional understanding. Emma had continued to grow stronger, now able to speak in full sentences and even sit up properly in bed. Her eyes, once dulled by illness, sparkled with renewed life, though they rarely left Max's transformed figure. The dog had finally allowed himself to lie down beside her bed, his silver-white fur now carrying a subtle pulsing glow that seemed to ebb and flow with each labored breath he took. "Daddy," Emma said, her voice carrying a strange new timbre that seemed older than her years. "I saw things when I was sleeping. Max was there, in a place that wasn't here. He found me in the darkness." Her words caused David to exchange a worried glance with Jennifer, both parents uncertain how to process their daughter's experience. Dr. Martinez, who had been reviewing Emma's latest test results, approached the bed with a look of controlled amazement. "Every test we've run shows the same thing," she explained to the parents. "Emma's immune system hasn't just recovered, it's been fundamentally altered. The genetic markers for her autoimmune condition are completely gone, replaced by something we've never seen before." The veterinarian, Dr. Sarah Walker, who had been monitoring Max, added her own observations. "The changes in Max are equally extraordinary. His cellular structure is showing signs of acceleration, as if he's experienced years of aging in just hours. But it's more than that. There are changes in his DNA that don't match any known canine genetic patterns." Jennifer stroked Max's transformed coat, feeling the strange warmth that still emanated from his body. The once powerful German shepherd had taken on an almost translucent quality, as if the boundary between his physical form and pure energy had become blurred. His breathing was shallow but steady, each exhale seeming to release tiny sparkles of light that dissipated in the air around Emma's bed. "I remember everything," Emma continued, her small hand reaching out to touch Max's muzzle. "He came to find me when I was lost. There was a light, and he was there, but he looked different, like he was made of stars." Her description caused several of the medical staff to pause in their tasks, struck by the imagery. Dr. Chen, who had been quietly analyzing the ongoing brainwave patterns, suddenly called for attention. "Look at this," he said, pointing to his monitor. "Their neural patterns are still synchronized, but they're showing fragments of what appears to be shared consciousness. It's as if they've developed a form of telepathic bond, as if to confirm this observation." Max lifted his head at that moment and looked directly at Emma, their eyes meeting in a gaze that seemed to carry an entire conversation without words. The monitors recording their brain activity showed identical spikes of neural activity, creating patterns that one of the neurology residents described as impossible. "He gave me some of his life," Emma said simply, still locked in that silent communion with Max, "but he had to change to do it. He's different now, like the guardians in my dreams." Her words carried a weight that seemed to fill the room with an almost tangible presence. David, who had been documenting everything on his phone, noticed something strange in his latest photos. "The light around them," he said, showing the images to Dr. Martinez. "It's forming patterns." The pictures showed intricate swirls of luminescence connecting Max and Emma, creating designs that resembled ancient symbols no one in the room could identify. The veterinarian's next examination of Max revealed more changes. "His heart rate is stabilizing," she reported, "but at a much slower rate than normal for a dog his size. It's almost as if his entire metabolic system has been reconstructed." She hesitated before adding, "In all my years of veterinary medicine, I've never seen anything like this. It's as if he's evolved into something different." Emma, who had been listening to the adults discuss Max's condition, suddenly spoke with a clarity that silenced the room. "He's not just a dog anymore," she said. "He's my guardian now. That's why he looks like starlight." Her simple explanation seemed to resonate with a truth that transcended medical understanding. Jennifer noticed that the temperature in the room had begun to fluctuate in waves that corresponded with the pulses of light emanating from Max's fur. Each wave brought with it a sense of profound peace, as if they were in the presence of something ancient and benevolent. "There's more," Emma continued, her voice taking on that strange, knowing quality again. "He showed me things while I was sleeping, about love and sacrifice, and how sometimes the biggest changes come from the heart." She reached out to touch Max's transformed coat again, and where her fingers made contact, tiny sparks of light danced between them. "He says he's not leaving," Emma continued, her hand still resting on Max's shimmering coat. "He's just changing, like how caterpillars become butterflies, but different. He's becoming pure light, so he can always watch over me." The medical staff, trained to deal with life and death in scientific terms, found themselves witnesses to something that transcended their professional understanding. The monitors continued to record data that defied explanation, while the very air in the room seemed to pulse with an energy that no instrument could properly measure. Max's breathing had become so shallow it was barely visible, yet his silver eyes remained clear and focused, filled with a love that seemed to grow stronger even as his physical form began to fade. The transformation that had begun with his sacrifice was reaching its culmination, and all present could sense that they were witnessing something both heartbreaking and miraculous. The physical manifestation of a love so pure it could transcend the boundaries of nature itself. The midnight hour approached room 217 with an almost supernatural stillness. The regular sounds of the hospital seemed muffled, as if the space around Emma's bed had become separated from the ordinary world. Max's transformation had reached a critical point. His physical form now appeared to be more light than matter, his silver-white fur radiating waves of gentle luminescence that filled the room with a soft, pulsing glow. Emma, though exhausted, refused to sleep. Her eyes remained fixed on Max, tears rolling silently down her cheeks as she witnessed the final stages of her beloved companion's sacrifice. "He's ready now," she whispered, her voice carrying that strange mixture of childish innocence and ancient wisdom. "He wants to show us something important." The medical equipment surrounding Emma's bed began to respond to an unseen energy. Screens flickered with patterns that resembled auroral lights, while the more sensitive instruments recorded readings that pushed beyond their designed parameters. Dr. Martinez and her team watched in amazement as their carefully calibrated devices struggled to measure something that seemed to exist beyond the realm of scientific understanding. "The energy readings are off the scale," Dr. Chen reported, his voice hushed with awe. "It's as if the very fabric of reality is being altered in this room." The neural monitoring equipment showed one final surge of synchronized activity between Emma and Max, creating patterns so complex they resembled mathematical fractals. Max's breathing had become almost imperceptible, but his silver eyes remained bright and alert, fixed on Emma with an expression of such pure love that it brought fresh tears to everyone watching. His transformed body seemed to pulse with each heartbeat, each wave of light slightly stronger than the last, as if building toward something momentous. Jennifer clutched David's hand as they witnessed their daughter's beloved pet complete his extraordinary metamorphosis. The air around Max's form had begun to shimmer with tiny points of light, like stars being born in miniature. Each breath he took seemed to release more of these luminous particles, which drifted through the air like celestial snow. "He's not dying," Emma said suddenly, her voice clear and certain. "He's becoming something else, something wonderful." She reached out toward Max, and where her hand passed through the air, trails of light followed her movement, as if reality itself had become fluid around her. Dr. Walker, who had been monitoring Max's vital signs, suddenly stepped back in amazement. His physical readings, they're not declining, they're transforming. It's as if his biological structure is being converted into pure energy, but in a controlled, purposeful way. The transformation accelerated as midnight struck. Max's physical form began to emit pulses of light that grew progressively brighter, yet somehow didn't hurt the eyes of those watching. The silver-white fur that had marked his sacrifice now appeared to be dissolving into pure radiance, each strand becoming a thread of living light. "Don't be afraid," Emma said softly to her parents, who watched in stunned silence. "This is what's supposed to happen. He's becoming my guardian angel, just like he promised." Her words carried such conviction that no one could doubt their truth. Despite the impossibility of what they were witnessing, Max lifted his head one final time, meeting Emma's gaze with eyes that now shone like twin stars. In that moment, the monitors recording their neural patterns showed one last surge of synchronized activity, a perfect harmony of consciousness that transcended the boundaries between species and even between different forms of existence. The air in the room began to swirl with gentle currents of energy, creating patterns that resembled constellations in miniature. Max's physical form started to dissolve into these patterns, each particle of his being transforming into pure light. Yet somehow his presence seemed to grow stronger rather than weaker, as if he was expanding to fill the room with his essence. "Look," Emma whispered in wonder. "He's becoming starlight, just like in my dreams." The transformation had reached its peak, Max's physical form now completely engulfed in radiant energy. The light began to coalesce into a new form, not quite physical, yet more than merely energy. It retained the suggestion of his canine shape, but now composed of pure, living light. The medical staff watched in speechless wonder as their instruments recorded the impossible. The energy readings showed something that defied the laws of physics, a stable form of pure life force that maintained consciousness and purpose. The neural monitoring equipment continued to detect activity, even though Max's physical brain no longer existed in any conventional sense. Jennifer and David held each other tightly as they witnessed the final stage of their beloved pet's transformation. The room had filled with a warm, gentle radiance that seemed to touch everything with a sense of peace and protection. The light that had been Max began to settle into a new pattern, creating a permanent aurora around Emma's bed. "He's still here," Emma said, smiling through her tears. "He'll always be here now. He's become pure love and light, watching over us forever." She reached out toward the luminescent form that hovered near her, and the light responded, swirling around her hand in patterns that spoke of recognition and eternal devotion. The monitors tracking Emma's condition showed her vitals were perfect, her recovery complete. But they also showed something more. A permanent alteration in her own energy patterns, as if Max's sacrifice had not only healed her body, but had transformed her own being in subtle yet profound ways. As the new day approached, room 217 had become a sacred space where the impossible had become real, where love had proven stronger than the laws of nature, and where a dog's devotion had transcended the boundaries of physical existence to become something eternal and luminous, a guardian spirit born of unconditional love and willing sacrifice. Dawn broke over Memorial Children's Hospital, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold that seemed to mirror the gentle luminescence that still filled room 217. The night's extraordinary events had left an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed them, and as the morning shift arrived, they found a scene that defied explanation. Emma sat upright in her bed, completely alert and showing no signs of the devastating illness that had nearly claimed her life just days before. Around her, the air seemed to shimmer with a constant, gentle radiance that moved with purpose and awareness. What had once been, Max now existed as a living aurora, maintaining a loose suggestion of his canine form while flowing freely through the space around Emma's bed. Dr. Martinez arrived early, eager to check on her miraculous patient. The latest test results had confirmed what seemed impossible. Emma's immune system had not only recovered, but had been transformed into something unprecedented in medical literature. "I've sent her blood work to 3 different labs," she explained to Jennifer and David. "They all report the same thing. Her cellular structure shows changes we've never seen before." Emma watched the doctors and nurses with serene understanding, occasionally reaching out to touch the luminous presence that never strayed far from her side. "Max says they won't find answers in their tests," she said matter-of-factly. "Some things can only be understood with the heart." The room had become a focal point of intense scientific interest. Researchers arrived with sophisticated equipment, designed to measure energy fields and quantum phenomena, but their instruments either malfunctioned or produced readings that made no sense within known scientific parameters. "It's extraordinary," Dr. Chen commented, reviewing the neural monitoring data from the night's events. "Even though Max no longer exists in physical form, we're still detecting synchronized patterns in Emma's brain activity that suggest an ongoing connection. It's as if their consciousness has become permanently intertwined." Throughout the morning, the hospital staff noticed unusual phenomena in room 217. Electronic devices would unexpectedly display images of stars and auroral patterns. The temperature would fluctuate in gentle waves that corresponded with the movements of the luminous presence around Emma's bed. Most striking were the feelings of peace and well-being that seemed to affect anyone who entered the space. "He's still protecting me," Emma explained to a young nurse who had paused, mesmerized by the swirling lights. "But now he can do it in a different way. He's everywhere and nowhere at the same time." Her words carried that strange wisdom that had emerged since her recovery, as if Max's transformation had awakened something profound within her own consciousness. Jennifer and David watched their daughter with a mixture of joy and amazement. The tragedy they had feared had been transformed into something miraculous, though not without cost. David found himself reaching out to touch the luminous presence that had been their beloved pet, and while his hand passed through the light, he felt a warmth and sense of recognition that brought tears to his eyes. "He wants you to know he's happy," Emma said softly to her father. "This is what he was meant to become. He says that love is the strongest force in the universe, and sometimes it can change everything." The light swirled around David's hand, as if in confirmation of her words. Dr. Walker, who had witnessed Max's transformation from a veterinary perspective, spent the morning documenting everything she could. "What we observed goes beyond any known biological process," she noted in her report. "It wasn't death in any conventional sense. It was more like a transcendence of physical form, a transformation into pure energy that somehow retained consciousness and purpose." As the morning progressed, more unusual phenomena became apparent. Photographs taken in the room showed intricate patterns of light that resembled cosmic phenomena. The more sensitive medical equipment detected energy signatures that matched no known form of radiation or electromagnetic field. Yet despite the scientific mystery, there was an undeniable sense of rightness about everything that had occurred. "Max says this is just the beginning," Emma announced, watching the swirling lights dance around her room. "He says there are many mysteries in the world that we don't understand yet, but love can help us see them." The luminous presence seemed to pulse brighter at her words, creating patterns that resembled falling stars. The medical staff had begun to notice that patients in nearby rooms were showing unexplained improvements in their conditions. It was as if the healing energy that had transformed Emma was gradually extending its influence beyond the confines of room 217. The entire wing of the hospital had taken on an atmosphere of quiet wonder, as if touched by something profound and sacred. Jennifer, watching her daughter interact with the transformed presence of their beloved pet, felt a deep sense of gratitude mixed with awe. "I never knew," she whispered to David, "that love could be so powerful it could change the very nature of reality." The luminous aurora swirled around them both, as if embracing them in response to her words. By mid-morning, news of the extraordinary events had begun to spread throughout the hospital. Staff members found excuses to pass by room 217, drawn by the gentle radiance that spilled into the hallway and the feelings of peace that seemed to emanate from within. Each visitor left with a sense of having witnessed something that would forever change their understanding of what was possible in a world where love knew no bounds. The days that followed brought profound changes to Memorial Children's Hospital. Room 217 had become a place of pilgrimage within the hospital, where the boundaries between the ordinary and the extraordinary had permanently blurred. Emma's recovery had progressed beyond anyone's wildest expectations, and the time for her discharge was approaching rapidly, but the real story wasn't just about Emma's miraculous healing. It was about the transformation that had occurred within everyone who had witnessed Max's incredible sacrifice and metamorphosis. The medical staff who had been present that night spoke of it in hushed, reverent tones, their scientific worldviews forever altered by what they had seen. The latest research papers are starting to come in, Dr. Martinez explained to Jennifer and David, spreading out a collection of preliminary reports. Teams from around the world are studying the data we collected, but none of them can explain what happened here. They're calling it the starlight phenomenon, a complete transformation of physical matter into conscious energy. Emma, now sitting up and fully alert, watched the doctors and their instruments with quiet amusement. The luminous presence that had been Max continued to flow around her in ever-changing patterns, sometimes taking on the clear shape of a German shepherd made of light, other times expanding into complex geometrical patterns that resembled cosmic phenomena. "He says they're looking for answers in the wrong places," Emma commented, reaching out to touch a swirl of light that danced around her fingers. "The truth isn't in their machines. It's in here." She placed her hand over her heart, and as it did, the entire room seemed to pulse with a warm golden radiance. The effects of Max's transformation had begun to ripple outward through the hospital in unexpected ways. Patients in nearby rooms reported dreams of a gentle presence made of starlight that brought comfort and healing. The hospital's gardens had begun to bloom out of season, and even the most hardened skeptics among the staff found themselves experiencing moments of inexplicable peace when passing by room 217. Jennifer sat beside Emma's bed, watching her daughter interact with the luminous entity that had once been their family pet. "Do you miss him?" she asked softly. "The way he was before?" Emma shook her head, her eyes following the dancing lights. "He's more here now than he ever was before. He can be everywhere at once, watching over all of us. And sometimes," she paused, her face lighting up with joy, "sometimes I can see through his eyes, and it's beautiful beyond anything you can imagine." Dr. Chen had continued his neural monitoring, fascinated by the ongoing changes in Emma's brain patterns. "The synchronization hasn't disappeared with Max's physical transformation," he reported. "If anything, it's become more complex. It's as if their consciousness has merged on a quantum level, creating something entirely new in human experience." The morning of Emma's scheduled discharge arrived with a sunrise that seemed more vivid and beautiful than any the hospital staff could remember. The luminous presence that had been Max filled room 217 with shifting patterns of light that painted the walls with scenes of stars and galaxies. "He wants to show us something," Emma announced, sitting up in her bed. As everyone watched, the swirling lights began to coalesce into a more defined shape. For a brief moment, Max's form became clearly visible, rendered in pure light, not just as he had been, but as he now was, a being of radiance and conscious energy, his eyes holding the wisdom of stars. "This is his true form now," Emma explained, her voice filled with wonder. "He's become a guardian of light, watching over not just me, but anyone who needs help. That's why he had to change, so he could help more people." The medical team, documenting Emma's discharge, found themselves struggling to put into words what they had witnessed over the past days. How could they describe in clinical terms the transformation of a dog into a being of conscious light? How could they explain the profound changes that had occurred not just in Emma's body, but in the very fabric of reality around her? "We may never fully understand what happened here," Dr. Martinez admitted, signing the discharge papers. "But perhaps that's the point. Some things aren't meant to be understood through science alone." As Emma prepared to leave room 217, the luminous presence that had been Max seemed to expand, filling the entire room with a gentle, pulsing radiance. The light took on complex patterns that seemed to tell a story, one of love, sacrifice, and transformation, of bonds that transcended physical form, and of the infinite possibilities that exist when love is strong enough to reshape reality itself. "He'll come with us," Emma assured her parents as they gathered her things, "but he'll also stay here in a way. He says that's the wonderful thing about becoming light. You can be in many places at once, helping whoever needs you. The hospital staff lined the hallways as Emma left, each of them touched in some way by the miracle they had witnessed. As she passed, the lights above seemed to shimmer and dance, as if Max's presence was acknowledging each person who had been part of their journey. Outside, the morning sun painted the sky in colors that seemed more vibrant than before, as if the world itself had been transformed by what had occurred within room 217. The luminous presence that had been Max swirled around Emma in joyous patterns as she stepped into the sunlight, ready to begin a new chapter in a life that had been forever changed by a dog's ultimate sacrifice and transformation into something eternal and transcendent. In the months that followed Emma's miraculous recovery, the events at Memorial Children's Hospital became the subject of intense study and discussion in both scientific and spiritual communities worldwide. Room 217 had been transformed into something of a sanctuary, where the lingering energy of Max's sacrifice continued to affect everyone who entered. Though Emma had returned home, the story of what had occurred there continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways that no one could have predicted. The Collins family's home had become a place of extraordinary wonder. The luminous presence that had once been Max filled their living spaces with ever-changing patterns of light that responded to emotions and thoughts. Emma, now fully recovered and bursting with vitality, had developed abilities that defied explanation. She could see and understand things that others couldn't, as if Max's transformation had awakened something profound within her own consciousness. "The light shows me things," she explained to her parents one evening, watching the aurora-like patterns dance across their living room ceiling. "Max says that everything in the universe is connected by love, and now I can see those connections." The luminous entity swirled around her as she spoke, creating intricate patterns that seemed to illustrate her words with cosmic imagery. Jennifer and David had learned to embrace the extraordinary nature of their new reality. Their home had become a place where the impossible happened daily, where lights danced in response to emotions, where dreams took on physical form in swirling patterns of starlight, and where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds had become permanently blurred. Dr. Martinez continued her research into what she now called the Max effect. Her papers, published in leading medical journals, documented not only Emma's unprecedented recovery, but also the ongoing phenomena that surrounded it. "What we witnessed wasn't just a miracle of healing," she wrote. "It was a transformation in our understanding of what's possible when love becomes a tangible force in the universe." The hospital had been forever changed as well. Room 217, though now occupied by other patients, retained an atmosphere of profound peace and healing. Staff members reported that patients placed in that room recovered more quickly, experienced fewer complications, and often spoke of dreams filled with starlight and a gentle, protective presence. Emma's own transformation continued to evolve. She began to show an extraordinary ability to comfort others in distress, often accompanied by visible manifestations of Max's luminous presence. Children in the hospital's pediatric ward would speak of a friendly dog made of starlight who visited them in their dreams, bringing comfort and healing energy. "Max says that's why he had to change," Emma told a gathering of doctors and researchers who had come to study the ongoing phenomena. "He couldn't help everyone in his physical form, but as pure light and love, he can reach whoever needs him." The luminous presence brightened as she spoke, filling the room with patterns that resembled constellations in motion. Dr. Chen's continued monitoring of Emma's neural patterns revealed something unprecedented. "Her consciousness appears to exist in a quantum state," he explained to his colleagues. "It's as if she exists simultaneously in our physical reality and in whatever realm of pure energy Max now inhabits. The implications for our understanding of consciousness are staggering." The family began receiving letters from around the world, Stories of people who had experienced dreams or visions of a luminous canine presence during times of crisis. Each account shared similar details: a feeling of profound peace, a sense of being protected, and often unexplained healings that followed these encounters. Jennifer kept a journal documenting the daily miracles that had become part of their lives. She wrote of how the luminous presence would form protective barriers of light around Emma when she slept, how it would create detailed scenes from pure energy that told stories of cosmic wonder, and how it would respond to the emotions and needs of anyone who entered their home. "It's not just about Max anymore," Emma explained one day, watching the light dance around her room. "He opened a door between worlds, and now other beings of light can come through to help people. He showed them the way." The luminous patterns shifted as she spoke, taking on forms that suggested other presences, other consciousnesses that had followed Max's example. David, who had initially struggled the most with accepting these supernatural events, found himself becoming an advocate for a new understanding of reality. He began speaking at conferences, sharing their story with scientists and spiritual leaders alike. "What we witnessed wasn't just the transformation of our beloved pet," he would explain. "It was proof that love is the most fundamental force in the universe, capable of transcending physical laws and reshaping reality itself." The scientific studies continued, though they rarely provided concrete answers. Instruments placed in the Collins home recorded energy patterns that defied known physics. Photographs taken in their presence often captured incredible images of light formations that seemed to contain entire galaxies within them. Yet the true nature of what had occurred remained beautifully mysterious, beyond the reach of conventional understanding. Emma's sensitivity to the unseen world around her grew stronger with each passing day. She could perceive the emotional states of others with remarkable accuracy, often accompanied by visible responses from the luminous presence that had been Max. "He shows me how everyone is connected," she would say. "All the threads of light that tie us together, they've always been there, but now we can see them." The transformation that had begun in room 217 continued to expand outward, touching more lives and creating more possibilities for healing and understanding. The Collins family's experience had become a bridge between the ordinary and the extraordinary, proving that the boundaries between science and miracle, between physical and spiritual, were far more permeable than anyone had imagined. As Emma grew stronger and her unique abilities developed, she began to understand more about the true nature of Max's sacrifice and transformation. "He didn't just save my life," she explained to a group of children at the hospital, watching their faces light up as the luminous presence created dancing patterns in the air. "He showed us that love is stronger than anything, stronger than illness, stronger than fear, even stronger than death itself." The story of the little girl and her dog, who became starlight, continued to spread, touching hearts and opening minds to new possibilities. It served as a reminder that in a universe of infinite wonder, the most powerful force remained the simplest and most profound: the transformative power of unconditional love, capable of transcending all boundaries and reshaping reality itself. And so what had begun as a tragedy in a hospital room had become a testament to the endless possibilities that exist when love is strong enough to transcend the very laws of nature. Max's legacy lived on, not just in the luminous presence that continued to watch over Emma and touch countless other lives, but in the fundamental change in how those who witnessed their story understood the true nature of reality, consciousness, and the eternal bond between a girl and her guardian of light. 5 years had passed since the extraordinary events at Memorial Children's Hospital, and the impact of Max's transformation continued to resonate throughout the world in ways that no one could have predicted. The small hospital room that had witnessed the miracle had become a place of pilgrimage, with room 217 now transformed into a specialized healing center where the inexplicable continued to occur on a daily basis. Emma, now 11 years old, had grown into a remarkable young girl whose presence carried an otherworldly wisdom that touched everyone she met. The luminous entity that had once been Max remained her constant companion, though its influence had expanded far beyond their initial bond. The Collins home had become known as the House of Light, where the barriers between the physical and spiritual realms seemed perpetually thin. "It's beautiful, really," Emma explained to a documentary crew that had come to record their story. "Max showed us that love isn't just an emotion. It's a force that can change the very fabric of reality." As she spoke, the air around her shimmered with dancing lights, the transformed presence of her beloved companion creating displays that defied both photography and scientific explanation. Dr. Martinez had established the Max Foundation, a research institution dedicated to studying the intersection of consciousness, energy, and healing. The Foundation's headquarters, built near the hospital where it all began, had become a center for both scientific research and spiritual exploration. The building itself seemed to pulse with a gentle luminescence that visitors claimed reminded them of Max's transformed presence. "What we've learned in these 5 years has revolutionized our understanding of reality," Dr. Martinez shared during a global conference. "The data we've collected suggests that consciousness itself is a form of light, something Max seemed to understand instinctively when he made his remarkable sacrifice." The presentation screens behind her flickered with impossible patterns as she spoke, as if in confirmation of her words. Jennifer and David had become advocates for a new kind of healing, one that bridged the gap between traditional medicine and the extraordinary possibilities they had witnessed. Their experiences had led them to establish a network of healing, centers where children with severe illnesses could come to experience the lingering effects of what had become known as the starlight transformation. "The most remarkable thing," Jennifer explained to a gathering of medical professionals, "is how the energy has evolved. What began as Max's sacrifice has become something larger, a doorway through which other healing presences now seem to flow." The luminous patterns that filled their home had indeed grown more complex over the years, suggesting the presence of multiple consciousness working in harmony with Max's transformed spirit. Emma's ability to communicate with these presences had developed in extraordinary ways. She could now perceive layers of reality that others couldn't see, describing them as webs of living light that connected all things. Her drawings, filled with incredible detail and otherworldly patterns, had become the subject of study by both artists and quantum physicists. "Max shows me how everything is connected," she would explain, her hands moving through the air as streams of light followed her fingers. "Every person, every animal, every particle of existence. It's all part of one great dance of light and love." The luminous presence would respond to her words by creating spectacular displays that seemed to contain entire universes within them. The scientific community had been forced to expand its understanding of what was possible. Dr. Chen's ongoing research into the neural patterns first observed during Max's transformation had led to groundbreaking discoveries about the nature of consciousness itself. "What we're seeing," he explained, "suggests that consciousness isn't limited to the brain. It exists as a field of pure energy that can transcend physical form." The hospital room where it all began had developed unique properties that defied explanation. The energy readings from room 217 showed patterns that matched those recorded during Max's transformation, and patients placed there reported experiences that ranged from miraculous healings to profound spiritual awakening. The room had become a place where the veil between worlds remained permanently thinned. It's as if Max created a template for transformation, Emma explained to a group of scientists studying the phenomena. He showed that love is strong enough to transform matter into pure energy, and now that possibility exists for others. The etched, luminous presence brightened as she spoke, creating patterns that the researchers' instruments could detect but never fully measure. The impact on the medical community had been profound. Hospitals around the world had begun to incorporate what they called light therapy rooms, spaces designed to replicate the energy patterns first observed in room 217. While none could match the power of the original location, these rooms seemed to facilitate healing in ways that traditional medicine couldn't explain. David, once the skeptic, had become one of the most passionate advocates for this new understanding of reality. What we witnessed wasn't just a single miracle, he would explain in his lectures. It was proof that the universe is far more magical and interconnected than we ever imagined. Max didn't just save our daughter, he opened our eyes to what's possible when love becomes strong enough to transcend physical laws. The transformed presence that had been Max continued to evolve and expand. While its core remained connected to Emma, its influence had spread far beyond their family. Reports came in from around the world of people experiencing visits from a luminous canine presence during times of crisis or need. Each story carried similar themes: feelings of profound peace, unexpected healing, and a sense of being connected to something vast and loving. He's teaching us that there are no real boundaries, Emma said, watching the light dance around her room. Between life and death, between matter and energy, between one heart and another. It's all one continuous flow of love and light. The luminous patterns shifted as she spoke, forming images that seemed to show the interconnected nature of all existence. As the 5th anniversary of Max's transformation approached, the Collins family prepared for a special gathering at the hospital where it all began. People from around the world who had been touched by their story would come together to celebrate not just a miracle, but a new understanding of what was possible in a universe where love proved stronger than the laws of physics. The legacy of a dog's ultimate sacrifice had grown into something that continued to transform lives and challenge our understanding of reality. In the end, the story of Max and Emma had become more than just a tale of miraculous healing. It had become a testament to the infinite possibilities that exist when love becomes strong enough to transcend all boundaries, reshape reality, and remind us that in the great dance of existence, everything is connected by threads of living light. 10 years had passed since that fateful night in room 217, and the world had never been quite the same. The story of Emma and Max had become more than just a tale of miraculous healing. It had evolved into a phenomenon that continued to challenge our understanding of reality, consciousness, and the transformative power of love. Emma, now 16, had grown into a remarkable young woman whose presence seemed to bridge multiple worlds. The luminous entity that had once been Max remained an integral part of her life, though its influence had expanded far beyond anything anyone could have imagined. The Collins residence, once a simple family home, had become known globally as a nexus point where the extraordinary had become commonplace. People often ask me if I miss Max in his physical form, Emma shared during a global symposium on consciousness and healing. But that's like missing a candle after it's become the sun. He's more present now than ever before, not just with me, but with everyone who needs him. As she spoke, the air around the auditorium filled with gentle waves of luminescence that brought tears to many eyes. The Max Foundation, under Dr. Martinez's leadership, had grown into a worldwide network of research centers dedicated to understanding and implementing what they now called consciousness-based healing. The original Room 217 remained the most powerful nexus of this energy, but similar phenomena had begun manifesting in other locations where the Foundation had established healing centers. What we've discovered over the past decade has completely revolutionized our understanding of reality, Dr. Martinez explained during a prestigious scientific conference. The transformation we witnessed that night wasn't just a single miracle. It was the beginning of a fundamental shift in how we understand the relationship between consciousness, energy, and physical matter. Jennifer and David had become leading voices in a new movement that bridged science and spirituality. Their experiences had led them to establish a global network of healing sanctuaries where the principles first observed during Max's transformation could be studied and applied. These centers had become beacons of hope for those facing seemingly insurmountable medical challenges. The most remarkable aspect, David shared with a group of international researchers, is how the energy continues to evolve and expand. What began as our beloved pet's sacrifice has become a force that transcends individual consciousness, creating a network of healing that spans the globe. The luminous patterns that filled their home had indeed grown more complex and purposeful over the years, suggesting an evolution of consciousness that defied conventional understanding. Emma's abilities had developed in ways that even she was still discovering. She could now perceive and interact with multiple layers of reality simultaneously, describing them as intersecting fields of conscious light. Her artwork, which attempted to capture these visions, had become the subject of study by both quantum physicists and spiritual leaders. Max showed us that what we call reality is really just one expression of something much larger, she explained during a special gathering at the original hospital. Everything we see and touch is actually made of light and consciousness, temporarily taking physical form. He simply chose to return to that pure state to help others understand this truth. The luminous presence brightened as she spoke, creating displays that seemed to contain entire galaxies within them. The scientific community had been forced to expand its paradigms to accommodate what they were observing. Dr. Chen's research had led to the development of new technologies that could detect and measure what he called consciousness fields, patterns of energy that seemed to carry information and intention across space and time. What we're discovering, he explained during a presentation at a major university, suggests that consciousness isn't generated by the brain at all. Rather, it's a fundamental force of the universe like gravity or electromagnetism. Max's transformation gave us our first measurable proof of this reality. The impact on medicine had been revolutionary. Hospitals worldwide had begun incorporating consciousness chambers, spaces designed to facilitate the kind of energy transformation first witnessed in Room 217. While none could match the power of the original location, these rooms had led to countless cases of unexpected healing and recovery. It's not about replacing traditional medicine, Jennifer would explain to medical professionals, but about understanding that healing can occur on multiple levels simultaneously. Max showed us that the body's physical state can be influenced by conscious energy in ways we're only beginning to understand. The transformed presence that had been Max had become something akin to a force of nature, boundless, yet purposeful in its interactions with the physical world. Reports continued to pour in from around the globe of encounters with a luminous canine presence during times of crisis or need. Each account shared similar elements: profound peace, unexpected healing, and a sense of connection to something, vast and loving. He's teaching us that consciousness isn't confined to individual forms, Emma explained during a documentary interview. It's more like a vast ocean of light and love, and we're all waves within it. Max chose to return to that ocean while maintaining his individual awareness, showing us what's possible when love becomes strong enough to transcend all boundaries. The anniversary gathering at Memorial Children's Hospital had become an annual event, drawing people from around the world who had been touched by the ongoing miracle. Room 217 remained the heart of this phenomenon, its energy growing stronger and more refined with each passing year. The most beautiful part, Emma shared with a group of children visiting the room, is that this isn't just about one dog's love for one girl anymore. It's about understanding that love itself is the fundamental force of the universe, the power that holds atoms together, that keeps planets in orbit, that connects all living things. As she spoke, the luminous presence that had been Max created displays of light that seemed to illustrate her words, showing the interconnected nature of all existence. The children watched in wonder as patterns of energy formed and dissolved, each one telling a story of cosmic interconnection and endless possibility. The legacy of that miraculous night continued to grow and evolve, touching more lives and opening more hearts to the extraordinary potential that exists within every moment. What had begun as a dog's ultimate sacrifice had become a window into the true nature of reality, a reminder that in a universe of infinite wonder, love remains the most powerful force of all, capable of transcending every boundary and transforming everything it touches into light. And so, the story of Emma and Max became more than just a tale of miraculous healing. It became a testament to the boundless power of love, a force strong enough to transcend the barriers between life and death, matter and energy, the physical and the spiritual. The luminous presence that had once been Max continued to touch, lives across the world, appearing to those in greatest need, bringing comfort and healing to countless souls. Room 217 remained a beacon of hope, where the impossible became possible, and where the boundaries between worlds grew thin enough for miracles to slip through. Emma grew up surrounded by the starlight that had once been her beloved companion. Her understanding of the universe forever changed by the sacrifice that had saved her life. She devoted herself to helping others understand the profound truth that Max had revealed, that love is the fundamental force of the universe, capable of transforming everything it touches. The Collins family's experience opened new pathways in medicine and science, challenging our understanding of reality and consciousness. But more importantly, it reminded the world that in our darkest moments we are never truly alone, that love, in its purest form, can reshape reality itself. Max's legacy lived on, not just in the shimmering lights that dance through hospital corridors or in the countless stories of healing and transformation that followed in his wake, but in the fundamental truth he had demonstrated through his sacrifice, that love, when pure enough, strong enough, and selfless enough, can transcend every boundary we think we know. And somewhere, in the space between starlight and shadow, between matter and energy, between one heart and another, a dog's love continues to light the way, showing us that in a universe of infinite wonder, the greatest miracle of all is the power of unconditional love to transform everything it touches into light. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the incredible bond we share with our animal companions, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Every week, we bring you remarkable true stories that celebrate the extraordinary love and loyalty of our four-legged friends. Hit that notification bell to make sure you never miss our latest stories of hope, healing, and the unbreakable bonds between humans and animals. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that love truly has no limits. Want to see more stories like this? Leave a comment below telling us about your own special connection with your pet. Together, let's celebrate the amazing ways animals touch our lives and transform our world. Thank you for being part of our growing family of storytellers and animal lovers. Until next time, keep believing in miracles.